called to thrive as a highly sensitive person. I went live and I talked about whether or not you're a highly sensitive person a couple of days ago. Ask the question whether or not you have often been asked, are you, whether or not you've been told you are too sensitive. And I wanted to suggest that you're not too sensitive, that you might be a highly sensitive person. In our mentoring group that happened the following day, a number of questions were asked around sensitivity and heightened sensitivity, as I described on Tuesday in the live that I did. And then, like, well, can I thrive as a highly sensitive person? And I want to answer yes, you can thrive as a highly sensitive person. With these questions and the discussion that flowed, there was one main thing that I wanted to get across to the group. And there's one main thing that I want to get across to you as I talk to you now. And that is, as highly sensitive people who have all of the feels that are coming towards us, all of our senses are highly, highly wired, and we can even go into nearly a state of overwhelm, that we can learn how to steward those senses in such a way that it is a gift to ourselves. Our heightened sensitivity is a gift to ourselves just as much as it is a gift to the body of Christ, or those around us. And I think one of the keys to learning how to turn the volume is learning how to turn down the volume on the emotional content that is coming towards us through our senses. Highly sensitive people, as I explained in Tuesday's live, are people who are more aware. They get more input of information coming at them on a regular basis. So the 80% of the population who are not highly sensitive will not recognize the nuances that are necessarily going on in a crowded room of people. Whereas someone who is highly sensitive, who is wired up this way, which is about 20% of our population, it is recognized as a scientific fact that about 20% of our population, men and women, regardless of age, socioeconomic strata, or even regardless of cultural background or country, about 20% of us are highly sensitive. And it doesn't necessarily make us more intuitive. Well, it can make us more intuitive. It doesn't necessarily make us more intelligent or better people, even kinder people, although they can tend to be a bit kinder. But it does make us more sensitive in such a way that the information that is coming into us through our sight, through our hearing, through our feeling, it can all be turned up at a much higher volume than the average person. So one of the skills that I taught my children, and that I have had to, as an adult, teach myself, is how to turn the volume down on the emotional content that is coming at me through my senses. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that sometimes I'm going to hear someone yelling at me emotionally, when in actual fact they're just communicating something at a normal volume in the emotional realm. So that means that what I need to do is I need to take what is being said, remove the emotional content, turn the volume down. I might be hearing it at a 10 and they might be communicating it at a 3 to me, because I'm aware of all of the other cues that are going on. I'm aware of the tone of voice, the words in particular that are being used, the posture of the person, even the speed at which someone might be speaking. And it's not an overt understanding of that. It's just it all comes at me, and it all comes into my environment, and I start to take it on board just naturally at a much higher emotional volume than what the average person would. So I've married someone who's not highly sensitive. Andrew is not highly sensitive, and there's nothing wrong with that either. He's a beautiful man who loves me and his children. He's a very loving man. He tends to be an introvert, but he's not highly sensitive. So he can be saying something in such a way that I'm hearing it at an emotional volume of 10, and he's actually directing it at me at an emotional volume of 2. I have to turn the volume down on the intent behind what it is that he is saying. I need to look beyond what is being said, how I am receiving it, and prophetically look to his heart in what he is actually saying, and then try to understand it from there. One of the most beautiful times of trying to explain this to one of my children was when my daughter had been promised by a friend that they would hold hands. That she was very young, she was like 7 or something. They had to hold hands when they went across the schoolyard to go to the senior school. She was in a junior school and she had to cross over to the senior school. And the girl that had promised to hold her hand broke her promise the following day. And she couldn't understand this because we had raised her to honor promises that have been made. If anyone's watching, would you please pray for my voice? Second time this has happened when I've gone live. So she would, she was quite shocked by this. And I said, not everyone is raised with the same values as our family. And for her, it was like a light turned on. And she went, oh, I didn't understand that, Mummy. So she had to turn the volume down on that rejection, understanding that that child had different values to our values. And that helped her manage life going forwards. So one key that is to learn how to turn the volume down on the emotional content that is coming at us through our senses. If you're highly sensitive, if you also carry a prophetic gift, as well as a gift of discernment, and often they all come together, understanding that the emotional content that you're picking up is not necessarily your own can be very, very empowering. So this is one of the reasons why it is so important that we learn how to recognize and respond to the voice of God. Not all feelings belong to you. Not all emotions are yours to pick up on. Often you will be picking up on other people's emotions. You know, when you get that concept of you walk into a room and you go, there was a bit of stinking thinking in that room. And you're like, you're picking up on what was going on. Thank you for those that are praying. Thank you so much for those that are praying for my voice as I'm teaching. It's helping. So sometimes you can walk into a room and you can tell that someone has been having an argument or they have been really struggling with their health. And you're like, you don't even mean to stick your finger in where it hurts. And you just pick up on it. Part of that's a prophetic gift. Some of it is being a highly sensitive person. And some of it is a gift of discernment. Learning how to recognize and respond to the voice of God will help you because you are then in a situation where you can start having a conversation with God as you are feeling all of these emotions and say, is this mine? What am I discerning? What am I picking up on? It is so important to understand what it is that you're actually journeying in. We need to learn how to steward the gift. To say, well, you know what, I'm wearing my HSP, highly sensitive person badge, and this is just how I am. That doesn't cut it. If you want to develop and grow in the kingdom of heaven, you need to take responsibility. I'm being quite direct. You need to take responsibility for how you're wired up, learn how to recognize and respond to the voice of God, understand the prophetic gift, understand the gift of discernment, start to train in the way that James, that we're encouraged to. I mean, Hebrews 5:14 says, but solid food is for the mature who because of practice have their senses trained to distinguish good from evil. Highly sensitive people have more of a challenge sometimes because they're all at sea because they're picking up on so much more through their senses. It is a superpower. But with every superpower comes a time of training and maturation. So when you can hear from God for yourself, rather than relying on others to tell you what he's saying or what is going on in the atmosphere, you can then start to develop some resilience. And it's what we need. So it's not only a matter of retreating and taking care of ourselves, it's also developing resilience so that we can step out into the world and carry greater weight. I mean, we're not called to carry the weight weight of the world upon our shoulders, which is what mum used to say. My mum used to say to me when I was a little girl. But we are sometimes called to feel the heart of God or to feel the pain of others, to pray the solution into the atmosphere, to pray the heart of God into a neighborhood, a city, or a nation. And then what we do is we release the responsibility back to God. I mean, that pattern is beautifully articulated by Benny Johnson in a book called The Happy Intercessor. So if you are one that feels things, you can see issues so easily in other people's lives, in the church, all that sort of stuff, but you're not being well received, well, maybe it's you're being called to pray. And as a highly sensitive person, you'll be even more sensitive to that. Get educated, get hold of a book, get hold of that book by Benny Johnson, The Happy Intercessor, and start to read and understand. Sometimes we're picking up on things because God is calling us to pray. But other times we're just picking up on stuff. We're just picking up on other people's emotions, other people's challenges. And what makes us beautiful people to be around, creative, often loving people, people that have depth of insight and processing. What makes us beautiful can also, Peter McHugh, who was a pastor at the church that I used to belong to here in Melbourne, I can remember years ago him teaching on leadership, and he used to say that, and I think it was John Maxwell that he quoted, that a strength pushed to an extreme becomes a weakness. Being a highly sensitive person is a strength. It's a superpower. And every time I've sat down and I've spoken to someone who is wired up this way, and I've said, would you be any other way? And they've all said, oh, no, actually, I wouldn't. So let's take the gift of being an HSP, a highly sensitive person, learn how to steward it well, learn how to turn the volume down on the emotional content, learn how to recognize and respond to the voice of God, and start to have a conversation with him. I'm feeling this way, Lord. Is that me? Is that someone else? What do you want me to do with what it is that I'm picking up on? Take time out to just smell the roses. Literally, that's what I do. I get out in the garden, I get my hands into the dirt, and I chat to God while I do that. I chat to God when I go for walks on the beach too. And just take that time out, nurture yourself, and then get back out there. It doesn't happen overnight. A lot of the students were like, will it happen? What about you? Are you there yet? I'm like, no, I'm not there yet. I'm constantly being given a greater sphere of influence. I'm constantly being asked to step out, to step out, to step out into something new. And that is more challenging for someone who's wired up as a highly sensitive person. Quite often I'll be asked to travel by God, and I'll be stepping into new environments, and I'll feel close to tears sometimes because the overwhelm is on extreme. And I have learned not to call it an overwhelm. I've learned not to call it an overstimulation. I call it being highly stimulated. I call it a growth, an opportunity to grow. I call it challenges, and I call it spiritual resistance. I don't call it warfare. I don't call it overwhelm, overstimulation, because that is limiting where I'm able to actually grow. I'm being highly stimulated, and I'm growing into being able to learn how to steward more. I also have the benefit of a beautiful husband who can actually call stuff for me. So get around people that are safe people who can start to walk with you in all of this. If you don't have a partner, then find a good friend. Get educated about the sensitivity. See it as a gift. And it really is a gift. I mean, some of my students were like, this is not a gift. I said, it is a gift. Would you want to be anything else? And they're like, no. But then at the same time, it can be a challenge. So, of course, get the inner healing sorted out, do all of that, keep on showing up, but know that you've been wired this way, and it's beautiful. It's a superpower. Don't quench that aspect of you. Learn how to walk it out well, learn how to present with kindness to the world at large around you. Learn when you need to retreat and take some time out, and shine. Stand tall and shine, because we need the sensitive ones to arise and shine. You have the nuances, you carry the nuances within your heart. So arise and shine, for your light has come. Your light has come. Anyway, neurodivergent people too. Brett, would you say neurodivergent people? Yes. Yes. So I think that what I have actually noticed, yeah, okay. What I've actually noticed is it's about getting around people who are safe. I caught up with a beautiful friend this morning who I would say is highly sensitive and also neurodivergent. And I've said, I'd be happy to talk into your world about a better way to communicate things with leaders. And they're like, I would be open to that. But you've got to get around someone who can speak to you with love. So it's really, really important to get around safe people. But even, it doesn't matter who it is that is speaking into your world. There will come a time when what they say will seem abrupt to you, and it's about turning the volume down. But then, of course, it's about having a conversation with God. Can you trust their hearts? Can you trust them to want the best for you? And are they just having a tough day? So they came off a little bit rough. A beautiful story, and I know that I'm diverting and diverging. But a beautiful story was when Rebecca was very, very little, she used to say, Mummy, don't look at me like that. And I can remember, and I'd have the right words, I'd be saying it all the right way, but she was picking up the nuances in my facial expression as a little one. And I'd be like, I'm so sorry, sweetie. And Andrew would say, Beth, you've got to control your face. And I'm like, easier said than done. And the irony is that she is now, in her 20s, and she says to her father, don't look at me like that, Dad. So, you know, highly sensitive people that they know. So we've had to say to Rebecca, well, you know what, your dad's face does tend to sit like that anyway. So sometimes people just look the way that they look. Other times, they're making choices to control what it is that they're saying, and you've got to cut them some slack. So you might be picking up stuff. You might be wrong also. You might actually be wrong in what you're picking up. You might be seeing them through your own lens. It's so nuanced, isn't it? So I think that Brett, with what you're actually saying about neurodivergence and HSP, I think that it, I mean, I'm not a specialist in this area, but I feel like there's like this gradient where, you have your more sensitive people, maybe your prophetic people, all that sort of stuff, then more highly sensitive people, because not all prophetic people are highly sensitive. They might just see profoundly, and they might be the most brutal, you could say anything, and they've got the skin of a rhinoceros, and then you say something to me and I'll feel it. I will feel it. So it depends. But I think you're highly sensitive people, then neurodivergence, I think, probably leans into it as well. And of course, we move all the way through to the different spectrums. I don't know. All I know is that any understanding and any categorization that we recognize in our own lives is only a label, and when it's not an identity. It gives us a framework to understand ourselves and how we see the world at large better. And that, I believe, this is my belief, my understanding of the world, understanding how I'm wired up, and understanding how 80% of the population are wired up, helps me uh, to to step into the world with an understanding that 8 out of 10 people are not highly sensitive, are not going to understand the nuance. Then, of course, when you've got neurodivergence, there's that element again where, okay, you're hearing things in a different way. So it's about learning how to manage yourself well as you step out into the world. And of course, love only shares what a person can bear. But and that's Jesus, that's quoting Jesus. But then there is also scripture that talks about, let our words always be a gift to those that that can hear them. So there's this language of love that we've always got to function in. And I think that language of love is a framework that all people are called to, regardless of how they're wired. I've had people go, well, I'm just, I don't know how many people understand choleric, phlegmatic, I can't remember the rest of them, choleric, phlegmatic, sanguine, and melancholy. And that they were four categorizations that people used to say. And choleric was like a leader, considered a leader, could be a bit brisk, a bit harsh. And they just go, well, I'm just cleric, you've just got to take it. And the sanguine people go, well, I just love parties, so I have no organization. And the melancholies are like, no, I'm not going to be flexible because I like the rules. And then the phlegmatic would be like, I'm just going to hang out here and just hang out and not move at all. There was this categorization of those personality types, and that they became excuses not to grow, as opposed to a framework through which to understand each other, understand yourself, and to choose to grow in the areas that we're called to grow in. So I think that it's really important that we steward that well. I thank you for saying, and yeah, finding it challenge, finding relational stuff more challenging, Brett, I think is partly I don't know about your wiring, and I'm not going to declare anything that I think on the call, but I think for neurodivergent people, maybe even for highly sensitive people, it's sort of like, well, I don't understand it. This is how I see the world. And what we have to understand is not everyone sees the world in the same way that we do. So I can remember talking to a beautiful girlfriend. It's an example I gave in my mentorship. Talking to a beautiful girlfriend. She's got a very powerful strategic gift. She's on the board of schools and other organizations, very intelligent, high marketing level, just so insightful. And she would get so frustrated. I was having a conversation with her on the phone about a year ago, and she's like, she was talking about, it's just so obvious. I don't understand why they're not doing it. And she was really having a good old, chat to me about this. And it's like God just dropped it into my heart. I was listening and I went, gosh, it must be so frustrating for you. And then I suddenly went, you know what? I think that you are functioning in a gift. And you don't understand that the rest of the world doesn't see the world the same way that you do. And she just stopped, absolutely silent. And she said, what do you mean? I said, what seems obvious to you is not obvious to everybody. I think that strategist element in you is a gift. And I think that you now have a responsibility to take that strategist gift and take people on the journey from this is how you're seeing it, and take them to the place where you know they need to be. And it's like the penny dropped. And she went, oh. And I mean, that was insight that was, it was like a word of knowledge. So it came from outside of me, but it just dropped for her. And I said, I really think that this is a gift that you're functioning in. She's a Christian. I said, I think God's wired you up this way. And that's part of the process. There's a response. And I then called her on it because she's a beautiful friend. I said, you actually now have a responsibility to learn how to take people on that journey. And she went, oh. It's like the penny dropped. So it's about learning how to relate, understanding how we relate differently, not sitting in our box and throwing stones at people going, well, you don't see it like me, therefore I'm not going to associate. It's like, no, let's try to understand each other. We don't have to agree with each other, and we don't want to be the same as everybody else. So there is diversity in the kingdom, but don't let that diversity stop us from growing, and don't let that diversity stop us from communicating with each other. So in my conversation today, there was some language that was used that I didn't understand. And I didn't think, oh, I shouldn't ask what that word means. I just went, I don't know that word. That's a new word to me. Can you please explain? And so in that way, I better understood what was being communicated. So I think it's just about understanding better. So, but not everyone's going to see it that way. So I think that's the thing. Yeah, and I love that learning how to steward the heightened sensitivity. It just opens doors. And I'm not saying it's not an easy journey, and it doesn't end. So I think that we're constantly being grown by God. It's like, okay, you've got this one. I had an upgrade in the gift of discernment last year, and I was at sea. So it was like, oh, I've got to find my grid again, because we expand into the upgrade of the gift. We all want these massive gifts, But we have to understand there's a process in it all too. Learning how to steward it. How does it work with us? How does God want us to steward it? Where's the sphere of influence that we're called to? There's actually a whole lot more than just pick me, give me an upgrade. Yes, I'm gonna change a nation in a day. It's like, yes, but what sort of a person do you need to become? What skill set do you need to develop? How does the kingdom of heaven see you? And how can you cooperate with what it is that you need to do today so that you can become that person tomorrow? Anyway, I'll wind up. I hope that that's helped. I've just been thinking about, the impact of that live. People have really felt that they're being affirmed. I think it's really, really important. You're not you're not too sensitive. You are highly sensitive. Solid food, though, is for the mature who, because of practice, have their senses trained to distinguish good from evil. Highly sensitive people really need to learn how to steward their senses well. So it becomes a gift not only to the world and you burn out, but a gift to you as well. All right. Well, much love. And we will catch you really soon. I'll go live again next Tuesday or a little bit sooner if I can. Brett, if you message me privately, I'll give you the name of a book that you can read. I did mention it in the last live. All right. Much love. We'll catch you soon. Have a great weekend.